Alright everybody, in this video I'm going to be covering the two opposing forces. How do you find balance and how do you make decisions? So here I have these two different books here. You're probably wondering what books they are. You have over here The Gene Keys by Richard Rudd, and then you have this book called Money by Tony Robbins. Now what I'm trying to illustrate here with these two different books is not spirituality and business and all that. It really just comes down to what we're now seeing in the world, which is these opposites, right? If you look in the realm of business, there's really kind of no spirituality. And if you look in spirituality, a lot of these people don't have the understanding of business. And some of these spiritual, teachers literally, they're artists. And because they don't have some of the components that business people have, they're not able to sustain themselves, right? And so really these two books are really just to illustrate a bigger thing that's at play, which is that there's a merging of the two. And I want to talk about how you can utilize both to make effective decisions. Now, I haven't made content as consistently as I'm going to be making now, but as you start to watch my content, you're going to see that I have a very interesting take on business and how I utilize spirituality for my business. And so what I want to share is how I've been able to effectively do that with conversations with business partners, conversations with, clients, conversations internally, and really just share both sides. And so what I want to start with is the spiritual component. Now, I highly recommend this book. It's called The Gene Keys. Check it out. There will be a link below. I'll probably put an Amazon affiliate link. And that's the business side, baby. So check it out. If you don't buy it through my link, it's not a big deal, but I do want to share a little bit about this book. I could make an entire video, multiple videos on what this book has done for me, but I want to keep it simple, keep it short, really just explain the general framework of the spirituality component, which I'm going to reference as this book. And then from there, which my belief is that this needs to be the foundation to some extent, then we can utilize the vehicle of business, right? We can use the vehicle of business to further this, right? But it can't be one without the other, right? If you just have money, if you're just a business person, if that's all that matters to you, you're gonna miss out on some of the things that I'm going to share here. So I'm going to start here. This book was introduced to me by my mentor. His name's Francisco Jara. A lot of the stuff that I've learned throughout my journey as an entrepreneur have been credited to him, right? Or I would credit to him. And this book was first introduced to me probably in early 2017. And this book has a lot of stuff that I could really get into. But to simplify it, really what this book is based on is something called the I Ching. Now, to be honest, there's so many layers of the I Ching and what it is. I really don't want to go where I don't, where my knowledge kind of drops off, right? If you look at this book and you kind of look at the general layout of the book, is there's these keys, right? There's these gene keys, and there's up to 64. And these same 64 gene keys are basically, through the way that this is explained here, is that these 64 gene keys make up our entire human DNA, right? And so each one of these keys plays a pivotal role in the evolution of us as a species, right? And so what it does in a very simple format is it takes each one of these 64 keys and it illustrates what they would look like in their lowest form, their what you would kind of on a practical level call like medium form, or it's referred as like the gift, and then you have like the highest form, which in this book is considered as the siddhi. And so what I'm going to do is just kind of give you an example of what that looks like and then start to explain how this relates to business. Now, what you're going to see here is that I've been able to utilize this book to transform how I show up in my business. And so what this book has is this thing called a hologenetic profile. And you can fill it out on their website and put in your name, your email, your date of birth, where you were born, and the time you're born. If you know the time you're born, that's going to be a huge pivotal component. if you fill out this form, you're going to get a profile, and this profile is going to show you these aspects, right? These aspects of your profile and the keys that you have in your profile. Now it goes into a lot more depth, like I said, like there's placement of each key and what that means, and there's just different sequences. There's something called the activation sequence, and then there's something called the Venus sequence and the Pearl sequence. And these are all related to how we and what our highest being looks like, right? So you can see I'm going on to the spiritual side. Now what I'm going to do here is just give you an example of one of these keys and explain kind of how it actually shows up. So one of the ones that I have is gene key number 34. And at the lowest level, where I said kind of the low, it's referred to as the shadow, right? So these are all vibrations that essentially exist inside of us as humans. And our profile shows us which keys are more prominent in our being and play a bigger part in our own evolution. So this 34th key that I have here is in the shadow as force. And so you can now imagine that if you really begin to dive deep into these keys and understand how they work, you can really imagine how you can start to observe when you are forcing things and what that looks like if you were to transmute that energy into something higher, right? So when this force shows up, there's these two different ways that it shows up. One is called the repressive nature. So think of repressive as suppressive, right? Repressive, suppressive, right? You can imagine that when you feel an emotion, you either have two different ways that it almost gets expressed. The repressive is like to internalize it, to push it down, and to basically just repress, right? And so that's an internalized way of that emotion being felt by ourselves. Now the second aspect is the reactive nature. So the reactive is like if somebody says something, you feel the emotion, and however that shows up, if you externalize that emotion and you're exhibiting what it's causing you to feel outwardly, that's more in line of the repressive, right? So going back to this force component, my repressive nature is self-effacing, right? And so really just to give it a very small summary is it says, these are people who put themselves down and accept other people as their authorities, okay? So the self-effacing nature is about letting others walk all over you, right? So that's the repressive nature. That's the way that it shows up, is that it causes you to maybe, okay, somebody says something, okay, I just do it. That's like the repressive way, right? So you can imagine how when in business that shows up for me, how this book, this reference allows me to be aware of that and then move it into a higher state, which I'll share in just a little bit. So that's the repressive. Reactive nature is bullish. Their main problem is communication and inappropriate behavior. Because they are generally aware that they are being so bullish, they become furious when challenged. So a lot of what that specific component talks about is like how basically you can even relate these to like the Myers-Briggs test. On that one, I think I'm like the what is it, the challenger or the debater, right? So I kind of relate that on a practical level to the debater, right? So their main problem in this, when I show up in this way, is communication and inappropriate behavior. Because they are generally unaware that they're being so bullish, they become furious when challenged, right? And there's a lot more that it's written, and I'm really just touching, I'm not even touching the surface, to be honest. But you can see how if I see and feel that showing up in business, like, hey, where is maybe something happening where I'm just letting others walk all over me? Or where am I really becoming furious and trying to, force something and by challenging other people and what they think is right and I'm right? And so when you become acutely aware of that frequency, you can start to be like, oh, okay, I'm showing up in force. What is the gift, right? What is the next higher level of this? Strength, okay? So it just basically talks about the difference between the shadow of force and the gift of strength is both minuscule and enormous. The 34th gift employs the same terrific primal vitality, but unlike the shadow, it does so through appropriate activities and correct timing. Okay? So the force is like, it's trying to impose what my will on a situation, right? And it's disregarding time. It's disregarding pace of the natural flow of things. And the strength is understanding when to do it, understanding when is the right moment, understanding when something is open so that I have my opportunity to share, right? And so you can see how instead of maybe showing up in one of those two ways, where allowing others to walk over me or trying to just contend with anybody and challenge anything that they do, I can say, you know, it's not really something you just say, right? But it's an awareness of, man, I have the opportunity to maybe understand where I'm trying to do something that shouldn't be done at this time. Because when things are done in the right time and you have strength, it's like you can literally, you know, move things, right? And if you relate this on a practical level, like if you're weightlifting and you try to do something at the wrong time, you're not going to get as much power out of that movement, versus if you have the ability to time something right, you know exactly when to flex, you know exactly when to trigger, you're going to be able to move exponentially fast. So the next piece of that, the highest state, the siddhi, right, is essentially where epiphany meets majesty, right? So, and I know this one pretty well, and it just talks about how, you know, instead of these two different states where we have the shadow and we have the gift, you know, I'm maybe moving, even though it's in the gift, I'm still moving based off of like, I'm still going through my mind, right? The majesty is really just allowing myself to be a vessel in which I express life through. And that when I fully allow life to express itself through me, I move in a way that's different than, oh, I think now's a better time, so now let me do it. It's like I just let life set me up in those scenarios when the timing becomes right. And instead of me even having any control or any influence on when it should be, I'm patient enough to realize that, you know, maybe now could be the time, and here's where I am, and I didn't even have to try. And now let me show that true majesty. Let me truly just allow life to move me, instead of, okay, well, no, you're wrong, this is how it's like, you know, being able to be aware of that, right? So I'm literally, like I said, I mean, trying to explain it to you guys in this way and just introduce it is pretty challenging, because in some way I know this book quite well, and to try to like systematize and explain it, it's really, you know, it's interesting, right? Because this really is just the dynamic in which I try to move and live through life through, right? So to try to, you know, slice a piece of how I live and explain it to you in some sort of order really doesn't do it justice. But I do want to just now explain how understanding that framework can really help on this side, right? So, like I said, you know, there's going to be more videos about this and how I use this book. I'm just rolling with it right now, right? So we kind of went through that first piece, right? Which is the force, right? You have force at the lowest level, right? And that shows up in those two ways. Either I allow people to walk all over me, and so anything they say goes, and then I just start forcing stuff that they want to do, or I become very challenging. I become very, you know, bullish, as it explains, right? Then if I have the ability to become aware of that, I can move into strength. I can move into where when things are at the right time, when things are open, I can really show up in a powerful way, right? And then at the highest level, I'm able to literally say, I am not moving, I am just moved. You know, I'm just moved, and the not really doing or trying anything is the majesty, because I'm not saying, oh, I'm so strong, I'm so, you know, I can do this, I'm so powerful. It's like literally the strength becomes in trusting that life will take me where I need to be. That is the majesty, right? So now when you understand that framework, when things happen with clients, when things happen with Jake, when things happen with my girlfriend, when things happen with people, right? Because relationships are really the way that this gets becomes most visible, right? Like, and business is a relationship, right? And like I said, a lot of this I learned, if not all of it, from my mentor. So I'm not trying to, take credit where it's not due. This stuff shows up in the relationship. It's what is made visible, right? And so really how this shows up here, I'm not even going to really open this book because it's a very practical book about financial freedom and making money. But I want to talk about the business and the client relationship. And so, for example, I'll just explain what just happened before, Jake and I started filming these videos, right? Literally right now. And, without getting into so much of the details, what happens when you understand this framework, right, that I'm sharing here, is you start to become acutely aware of when things are at that lower vibration, when things are showing up in the shadow, right? And you know this because you not only have the correct information that you can use your mind to process with, but you can really feel it. And there's a dissonance, there's something that needs to move out of the way, and it's not just discipline, it's not just doing it, it's just not the next thing. There's an energetic blockage, and you could either decide to just bounce over it and put it down, then things continue to show up in that way, like I said, either self-effacing or bullish, right? And so in this example, with Jake, basically what happened was I felt a certain way about something that he was essentially doing or not doing. And, instead of me, in the past, without this reference point as clear as it is getting now, I would just literally project what I felt onto him because that was me not knowing, right? But instead of me actually being aware of, wait, like how come what he's doing or not doing or what I think he's doing is bugging me? Like, why is that bugging me so much? Like, what is that thing just nagging at me, right? And you can see that when you start to take this approach, not only with your relationships in business, but your relationships with just people in general, you start to realize and take full responsibility of your own wound, your own journey. And so instead of me saying, Jake, how come this, how come that, this, that, this is where we should be, this is what we should be doing, blah, 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 blah. I'm saying, wait, I don't need to say anything because why is this scenario even bugging me? And maybe I could say, well, this is bugging me because you said this and you're not doing it, right? Or maybe it's bugging me because I think I want this and then you're going the other way, right? I'm trying to say it without getting into specific details. And when you start to realize that a lot of these things that we feel are based off of our own thing inside, you start to realize, what is that there? What is that there? And I just did a post on my Instagram talking about this, and it's basically along the lines of, if you have experienced that same type of emotional pattern with somebody in a relationship with multiple people and at different timelines and just different areas, just different ages, that is the thread. And this book is about unlocking and moving these. And when you start to see business that way, where it's like, how come I just keep spending a bunch of money and not profiting, right? Instead of just thinking that is, I need to be more disciplined and I just need to cut our expenses, it's not that you shouldn't do that, but it's also, wait, what is the pattern? How come everything that comes in I just have the habit of spending? And you just start to look, right? And some things need time to really actually be understood, and some things may not be as deep as I'm explaining right now, right? But there is this understanding that we have to know that there's always a little bit more than what it may seem. And I think a lot of people understand that like there's a reason maybe that I just continue to spend money over and over and we keep losing money. And it's like, man, maybe I'm being careless, maybe I'm being, what is that, right? And so when you start to realize, like for me, what that used to be was like, I used to really just not, like if you look at my keys, like one of them is like this component of judgment and then integrity, and then perfection, right? And I think without getting too much into the shadow or the lower version of that, I just started to see that the integrity for me was really being aware of the financial piece and really taking charge of what I felt was in integrity with what I'm saying I want to do, right? And so, not to get too into detail, you can imagine that if you start to utilize this framework, and I literally don't even think I did a good job of explaining it here, but if you utilize this framework in business, when a client says, hey Quinn, how come this isn't done yet, and then instead of you just saying, oh shoot, I gotta do this right now, that feeling that it has right as soon as you imagine that happening. There's that feeling, right? Boom. That's what you gotta decipher. That's what you gotta unlock. Is like, they're not valuing me. Maybe that's what it is, right? Or how come when they said that, I felt like I'm rushed? Or when they said that, I felt like they ignored all the other work I did and that they didn't even care or acknowledge it. And then it's like you're looking for those key words. Oh, they're not acknowledging me. And then it's like, boom. And then you start to move through the entire progression, right? So the reason I have these two books here is to show you that everybody thinks that this is just about, here's what I got to do next. Here's the next plan. Here's the next funnel. Here's the next marketing strategy. And when you really start to drop into these things that you feel, you realize that the unlocking of these things is what life is really all about. And that if you do it in the format of business, it's like you're not only unlocking and moving yourself closer to the fulfillment, but that you also will externally reap rewards. Because if you start unlocking things and you start becoming and moving out of these lower vibrational habits and patterns, and that when somebody says something, you're just like, shut up, or just whatever that is, and it just wants to come out, and you're just like, I remember a few years ago, I would just literally get so mad. And I literally feel like I'm at the point where somebody could almost say anything to me, and it's just like, it really won't even move me. Because you get to this point where you are clear about the dark of yourself. And when you embrace it and you actually understand that these things that you hide need to be moved into light and need to be made aware, that it's like, wow, I know everything, bad about myself. I don't care, what this person's saying is not going to hit me because of the fact that I'm aware of it. I'm clear on it, right? So I want to just put this out there to see what happens with it. Hopefully in some way it's, brought you value, or maybe you've seen or had a little insight on it. But essentially, I've used this book to really, unlock and move my business in a completely different direction, because I've embraced the fact that that what the client just says is not what they just say. There's always something under it. There's always a hint of something else. There's always something else moving under it. And when you stop ignoring those things and think that, oh, well, they just said that, that's what they want, I'm just going to do it, fine. It's like you start to become acutely aware of where are you even putting your work out from? If you're putting your work out from that frustration because they said you need to do it now and it needs to be hurried, that is the stuff you got to be aware of. Great work can only come from being in that great place, and it doesn't mean that you're always going to be happy and that you're not going to have to be disciplined and that things aren't going to come up. If anything, more stuff will come up now that you're aware of it. But because it's not blind, because it's not unconscious, you now are aware of every single thing you're doing has intention, and people wonder, oh, how come I can't wake up on time? And, I just want to snooze, and they think it's just, oh, let me go set an alarm clock in the other room and just, force myself to get up. It's like, why are you not inspired to wake up, right? And so when you start unlocking these things, that stuff gets easier. Because you realize that setting your alarm in another room or making it super loud or doing all these different things to try to wake up is not really you understanding what's going on, then that's just always going to be the thing you're going after, is the next software, the next app, the next thing that's going to help you get the thing you want, when you really got to be aware that the unlocking of these things are the key to doing it. And so if you unlock them, you can look at it through the lens of business. You can use the business as a way to unlock. Imagine you want to hit $10,000 a month. You got to unlock the stuff that actually gets you to that thing. And if you just unlock it on the physical level through discipline and through doing it and just pushing, you'll get the money, but then you won't have the feeling. And the key is both. So it's not that you won't be able to unlock and need to unlock things on the physical level, like making sales calls and talking to people and making offers and collecting invoices, right? And building a funnel. It just means if you just do that, you're going to be like, man, I got the money, but I'm still like, when my mom says this thing, I still get super pissed, right? So you want to be able to embody both levels where it's like, man, not only am I bringing in this income, but yet who I am at this level is very, it's very congruent with the money I'm making, and I have the ability to move it and use it effectively and understand it, right? Versus just feeling out of place with a bunch of money, right? So I'm gonna wrap it up here. We're at 27 minutes. There is a merging happening with both of these things, spirituality, business. There will be a merger. It's happening right now, and hopefully in some way this has inspired you to check out that book. And hopefully you can let me know on Instagram, send me a DM and say, hey, I checked out the book, or I liked your video. Let me know. Please leave a like, subscribe if you found this valuable. Like I said, there will be a video every Sunday, and hopefully they find you valuable or find you well. All right, you can leave that in. All right, peace. Bye-bye.